Iran-US conflict is now in a second phase. After the collapse of high-stakes talks in Islamabad, US announced a naval blockade, targeting ships linked to Iran. Now it's a move that significantly raises tensions across the globe. Iran hit back with strong warning, calling the action illegal and signaling possible retaliation. But the big question is, what is driving Donald Trump? Trump came on no war promise, and now he finds himself in the middle of a big war. What happened to the global rule-based order? Will this mark the rise of China? Will NATO survive? Has the war also shown the limits of US power? To unpack all this, I am joined by Salvatore Babones from Sydney, Associate Professor from the University of Sydney, who tracks global geopolitics. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me.
Pleasure to talk to you.
So my first question to you is, what is your assessment? Why did the talks in Islamabad fail?
Oh, I see no reason not to take Donald Trump at his word on this. The key issue for the United States has always been simply Iran not having a nuclear weapons program. And for that, it means practically speaking, not having nuclear enrichment capacity whatsoever. And as Donald Trump said, this was a deal breaker for Iran. Iran was not willing to give up, or at least not willing to give up its existing stockpiles of fissile material, of purified uranium. And without giving that up, Trump said no deal.
Do you think that the Americans have been able to reach their political objectives? They said IRGC will go, IRGC remain. They said there will be a popular revolt. The popular revolt has not happened. There is no clear information on what has happened to the fissile material too.
Well, I mean, there are maximalist objectives, and then there are sufficient objectives. Of course, if politically speaking, if Donald Trump is going to attack Iran, he's going to shoot for the moon. What he wanted, obviously, was that there would be an overthrow of the Iranian government, that by wiping out a substantial portion of the Iranian leadership, he would have hoped that people would rise up and institute a revolution in the country, or that the Venezuelan example would repeat itself, that the next generation of leaders would say, thanks for getting rid of the existing leadership, we'll now play ball with the United States. Now, that hasn't happened in Iran, and that maximalist U.S. super win hasn't occurred. But on the other hand, I think we should keep in mind that ultimately the main purpose of this exercise is, frankly, to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. And anything that sets Iran back by 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, put a number on it. We don't know how many years, but we do know this has substantially retarded Iran's access to nuclear weapons. That's ultimately a win.
But there's also a price that the global south is going to pay, with the Americans now blocking the Persian Gulf. Now it's a two-way blockade.
Oh, not only the global south, Australia, China, the European Union are all paying a price. And I think the key thing is, when Donald Trump asked for NATO allies and other U.S. allies to contribute to the war effort, and they almost to a country said, no, we're not going to help, the attitude in the U.S. that I think has been completely misunderstood in the rest of the world is that this is not America's oil. The United States hasn't depended on the Persian Gulf for oil in 50 years. I mean, it's just not a problem for the U.S. economy if the Persian Gulf were to remain permanently closed. Now, it's a serious problem for the rest of the world, to which the Trump administration's message to the rest of the world is, if you want your oil, you convince Iran to do what we want. That is, from the U.S. standpoint, keeping the Strait of Hormuz permanently closed, while it damages U.S. allies like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, is not such a terrible outcome.
But what is driving Donald Trump? What is the impulse? He came on a plank that, the endless wars of the Democrats, I'm going to put an end to it. And now Trump is in the middle of the most protracted gridlock.
If I had to guess, and obviously none of us know this for certain, if I had to guess, Israeli intelligence presented him with a rare opportunity, that it was able to track this conclave of Iranian leadership and pretty much said, if you, the United States, will use your extraordinary heavy weapons capacity, and remember, Israel is very well armed but does not have the same level of heavy bombers and heavy weapons the United States does, it essentially offered the U.S. the opportunity, take out these targets if you want. And presented with that opportunity, it seems the Trump administration jumped at it. Notice that there was not a long-term U.S. buildup for conflict in Iran. It was completely opportunistic. I mean, the U.S. focus was on Venezuela, which has been a remarkably successful, again, from the U.S. standpoint, a remarkably successful intervention for the United States. And the hope would have been to repeat what happened in Venezuela in Iran. Now, that hasn't happened. But, it was a gamble on Trump's part, I think, that if it's a short war, if there are immediate successes, the U.S. public is not going to be upset about this. On the other hand, if it drags out for 6 months, if the U.S. got involved in an intractable land warfare in Iran, the U.S. public would be upset. But I would venture to say that if the war stays at the current level of U.S. troops continuing to pummel Iran at will from a distance, I doubt that would have any major electoral repercussions in the United States.
But in any war, the objectives are what will your country gain from it? What will America gain from it? Are the red lines, the American red lines and the Israeli red lines in this war become one?
Look, ultimately the issue is Iranian nuclear weapons. I don't think there's any reason not to take that at face value. It's been the stated aim for decades of U.S. policy. There's nothing else in particular for the U.S. to gain in the war other than preventing Iran having nuclear weapons. And, from a U.S. standpoint, this is similar to, imagine if in, say, 1990, India had the capacity to prevent Pakistan from getting a nuclear weapon. Would India have intervened to try to prevent that? I mean, it would have been very tempting, because once Pakistan has that nuclear weapon, it always has that nuclear weapon, and relations between the two countries change forever. And I think in the same way, it was an opportunity presented to prevent Iran from gaining nuclear weapons, and the U.S. gambled on that, seized that opportunity, hoping that a major strike could not only retard Iran's nuclear program, but also spark an uprising in Iran. Now, that uprising hasn't happened in Iran. The new leadership has not come to the table. It doesn't mean that they won't, but it means that that gamble has not yet paid off. It's not a high-stakes gamble from the U.S. standpoint. I really have to remind Indians and people in the rest of the world, from the U.S. standpoint, the only negative outcome of this war to Americans so far has been the loss of, very sad, but the loss of a small number of service people, and that oil prices have gone back up to 2022 levels. Now, in real terms, oil prices today, gasoline prices, I should say, in the U.S. domestic market, are no higher than they were 30 or 40 years ago. That's not a highly destructive outcome. Now, in Australia, it's been a serious outcome. In Australia, there are shortages of diesel fuel that are disrupting supply chains in Australia. But, of course, Australia said it didn't want any part of this war. So it's not Australia's war, it's America's war.
But the war is having an impact in South Asia.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So in that context, isn't Trump worried about losing friends, allies, NATO, stable partnership like the Five Eye Alliance or the sort of partnership which Donald Trump built with India? From the American perspective, does it count, or it's somewhere down the hierarchy?
I think in Trump's mind, and there's a lot of reality to back this up, the U.S. alliances ceased to be alliances 10 or 20 years ago, in the sense that U.S. allies have not maintained sufficient strength of their own in order to contribute in the case of a U.S. conflict. I mean, let's take an example like Spain. Spain has denied overflight to U.S. airplanes attacking Iran. But Spain's a NATO ally. Spain, in theory, is pledged to defend the 30 other members of NATO, but who's waiting for Spain to help out, right? So that's an extreme case. But if you look at other allies, other than Japan, and the U.S.-Japan relationship has become ever closer over the years. Other than Japan, other U.S. allies have not maintained their military readiness at such a level that they really matter in U.S. calculations. Now, I don't think it's wise for the Trump administration to alienate these countries in the long term, but I think in their immediate calculation of what could one of these countries do for the United States before Trump leaves office in 2025, I think his answer is not much. That is, he feels he doesn't need any favors from the United Kingdom, from Australia, from Canada, from NATO, and so he can afford to alienate them, and whatever happens in the 2030s is not really his problem.
So let me ask you a broader question. What is driving the American foreign policy? When Trump came to power, people thought, well, it's about containing the rise of China. It's more about the chips. It's more about Taiwan. And then Venezuela happened, a little bit of Ukraine, talks with Russia, and right now is in the middle of the war in West Asia. So has the goalpost within the foreign policy changed, or how would you define it? Or is it in a way to prevent the rise of petro-yuan economy?
No, I don't think the goals have changed at all. There's been a minor setback in the sense that Iran has not been a walkover, right? So the Iran war, instead of taking 2 weeks or 4 weeks, is still going at this point. But if you leave that that incalculable out, you can't know how quickly things will happen. The U.S. strategy in the Trump II administration, and I think this has to go down to Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War. This new Trump team, which is very different from the Trump I team, this new Trump team seems to have a strategy of take out the client states one by one. Russia and China are a problem, but take out all the client states. Take out Venezuela, take out Cuba. Ultimately, take out Iran. That is by removing the
Syria.
client state.
Syria.
North Korea. I mean, North Korea isn't.
Syria.
Syria, very much. Yes, Syria is take out a client state of Russia, and by taking out these client states, it leaves the other great powers nowhere else to go in the world. That is, even if the U.S. alienates the United Kingdom or alienates Germany, the United Kingdom and Germany are not going to join China. Right? That's simply never going to happen. They may be less cooperative with the United States. But again, I think Trump's calculation is that the United States no longer needs their cooperation. I can't overstate the extent to which other countries in the Western alliance have allowed their defense capabilities to deteriorate to the point where the United Kingdom can't put a fleet to sea. Yes, it sailed the Queen Elizabeth around the world, but now it's off in dry dock and it can't sail again for quite some time. The other countries in this alliance, Australia said it did not have the capacity to send a single frigate to help with U.S. operations against Yemen or against Iran because its frigates were not sufficiently modern, and they didn't have the missile defense capacity.
So if I keep aside the social media posts of Donald Trump, if I keep them aside, is there a method to this madness?
Well, that's what I'm saying. The method is a very realist calculation that allies without the capacity to help aren't useful allies. And leaving aside all moral calculations, all public relations calculations, the only U.S. ally, now I'm not talking partners like India, I mean actual allies, that have the capacity to help the United States are Poland in Europe and Japan in Asia. And the U.S. has maintained very close relations with Poland and Japan. The other countries that talk about being friends and allies of the United States, that the Biden administration was very keen to pull in as friends and allies, simply have not maintained the capacity, whether it's defense capacity or the defense economic capacity, to be of instrumental use in a conflict like this. I really think the Trump administration has made a rational calculation that it can alienate these countries. It's clearly alienating these countries. There's no doubt about it. Public opinion in the rest of the world has turned decisively anti-Trump and anti-America. But I think the Trump administration, frankly, doesn't care about that.
Doesn't care about that. Just to get the conversation home, what explains the rise of Pakistan in this entire state of affairs, that it was able to host this talk?
Yeah, Pakistan has played the personalistic politics of the Trump administration very well. So instead of trying to present itself as a strategic partner, it's presented itself as a personal partner to the Trump circle, the Trump family. As many of your viewers will know, Pakistan created a partnership with Trump family members regarding cryptocurrency. It has done personal diplomacy very well, and I think that has really improved its situation in Washington. That shows, I think, a small-mindedness and a naivete on the part of the Trump administration, a complete lack of understanding of South Asian international relations in the Trump administration. It's a clear weak point for the administration, but Pakistan got the gig so to speak, of hosting the talks, I'm almost certain on a personalistic basis that, Asif Munir is buddies with Donald Trump.
Okay. Before I let go of you, sir, two questions. What is the Indian challenge, and how do you explain the Iranian resilience in this war? So the first question, before we move on to the last question, what is the Indian challenge?
Look, the Indian challenge for the United States is that there's very low levels of knowledge and expertise about India, even in the U.S. strategic community. Americans simply don't know how India works, what the main fault lines of Indian politics are, what the main concerns of India are in the region. The only question in the U.S. that's asked is, will India oppose China? And as long as the answer is yes, that's good enough.
Okay.
There's just no sophistication regarding keeping India on side as a broad strategic partner. India is a fellow traveler. Now, I think that's very unfortunate. I would love to see India be a strategic partner of the United States, but let's face facts. India is a fellow traveler with regard to hostility towards China and nothing more in U.S. strategic calculations. The second question.
Last question. What explains Iranian resilience?
Iran hasn't been that resilient. I mean, if you look at it, Iran's lost its entire armed forces. Iran is highly vulnerable to the United States. It has exerted pressure on American friends and allies around the world, and the Trump administration has just the last 48 hours said, we no longer care what those friends and allies think, and the U.S. is going to prevent Iran from exporting oil regardless. And I think that was a choice. Should the U.S. invade Karg Island, or should the U.S. simply embargo oil at the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz? And it went with the.
So are you saying that they're just doing posturing, Iranian delegation, taking just a maximalist position in Islamabad? It's just posturing?
I think Iran's only tool at this point is just to say, we'll still be here. There's no. I mean, Iran is not fighting back at this point. Iran has no cards to play. Except that, Iran figures that the Iranian leadership, I should say, I don't want to say Iran because there are so many Iranians who are so vehemently opposed to this regime in Iran. But the Iranian leadership seems to feel like it can wait it out. And so it's just waiting. And I don't think that's a victory for Iran. I mean, if a certain group of people staying in power, remember, it's not the same people in power, they've all been killed. I mean, it's the second and third set of people in power. But if the same parties in Iran are able to stay in power, to them, that's good enough that they can continue to oppress their own population after the U.S. loses interest. But I don't think the Iranian nuclear program is ever going anywhere again. I think the moment there's any action on the part of Iran to dig up its nuclear materials, that'll get bombed into oblivion. I don't think that the U.S. watch over Iran is going to disappear as long as the current regime's in power.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for joining me on News 9. So, Professor Salvatore Babones, very clear that in this case, America really doesn't care because they have calculated to take on all the client states of the Russians and the Chinese. So